The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good evening and welcome to my State of Mind. I am Dan Yorke. Tonight's program is an important one because it talks about what the chiefs of police in Rhode Island have cumulatively decided to say to the public. Recently, a couple of weeks back, the Police Chiefs Association in Rhode Island held a press conference to introduce what they call their 20 promises to the community. It's a few assertions and then a series of programs, changes, beliefs, training methods, things that they want to incorporate into the way of doing business in policing here in the state, all in reaction to what the community and society in general demands now from police officers and police departments. The George Floyd incident certainly had much to do with finally culminating with this 20 Promises project, and I think it's pretty provocative. You're seeing this program for the first time on a Thursday evening, but may see it a couple of more times because of its importance. And so with no further ado, we meet two of the important people in the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association to talk to us about it. But in the meantime, first, here's the background.
One by one, police chiefs signed a pledge to implement the new policy changes as a way to restore the community's trust in law enforcement. Some of the changes include updating the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, researching the use of body cameras, and statewide use of force reporting.
Ending systematic racism in the criminal justice system is a responsibility we take seriously, an acknowledgement that things cannot continue as they have before.
The Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association described these changes as much-needed reformative action steps.
We understand there is work to be done, and we remain committed to adopting and following the best practices so that we can continue to carry out those duties fairly and impartially.
They are calling it the 20 for 2020 campaign. The policy changes will be listed on police departments' websites and shared through public service announcements. A part of the nationwide discussion of police reform includes defunding police. Lincoln Police Chief Brian Sullivan called it disastrous to take money from police without a plan.
It's not cut and dry, let's just, defund the police and turn it over to social workers. There's got to be a lot of conversation, like I said, who's going to fill that void.
And so with no further ado, we introduce two of the principals of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association. Its executive director, Sid Wardell, a former police chief, and current police chief in Lincoln, Brian Sullivan, who is the president of the organization. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is, I just thought that this press conference a couple of weeks ago was as profound as it comes. It is not easy for any industry to self-actualize. It's also even more difficult, I think, to admit that there are some serious issues that need to be addressed. So let's talk about the background on this. Sid, why don't you start and tell me about how this whole thing and this promises concept from the Chiefs Association began?
So, I mean, it started more with the death of George Floyd. There was agencies, law enforcement, stakeholders that were making statements around it. The first thing I think it did for us was sort of some self-reflection. A part of that was looking to make sure our use of force, when had it been last renewed, and then to make sure, that certain aspects that were now going to be questioned by the public, that where we were on those, such as we banned that chokehold. We haven't been using that hold for many, many years. We knew there was many areas that we wanted to talk about that law enforcement, was doing well, especially in the Northeast, but that also that there was legitimate reasons to look at ourselves and with the public making statements or suggesting certain things. And we found that we could not put out a one-page statement or anything close to that would, do right by both the men and women, but also to the public that we serve. And so it really just compounded from there that, we needed to be able to look at certain areas. This wasn't just going to be one topic. but rather, we knew we were the topic of conversation was law enforcement, and specifically law enforcement in New England.
Talk to me about what you think is or organically concern of police chiefs in Rhode Island. I mean, we're going to talk about the 20 issues here, but what's in the gut of police management right now with the time that we're in?
Well, I mean, obviously, one of the first things, we're concerned with the men and women that work for us, right? We want to make sure that they understand that, we have, their concerns, but we also are concerned with the community. The most important thing is that the community knows that we hear what they're saying and that we have to have tough conversations with them regarding the issues that have been brought to light lately, especially with the murder of George Floyd. That was shocking and embarrassing to any police officer that sees that. And we have to have those tough conversations as to what's taking place throughout the country and how it affects us here in Rhode Island.
It's hard. Look. I mean, it's easy to explain on its face that if you see police brutality, you have to admit it exists, even if it's minuscule in its existence. It exists. But to put it in writing, to say, "Hey, police brutality exists," that's something. How has that resonated across the rank and file? Has this been something that you found the rank and file is absorbing and appreciating, or are they a little miffed that the police management has gone a little bit over their skis on this whole thing? Either one of you guys.
Go ahead, Brian. I will tell you that I've had some conversations. I've received some emails from officers that are not happy with what we're doing. But I will tell you, I have received far more correspondence from folks that have said that what we did and what we're looking to identify and helps us get to the root of issues. And I think really, Dan, what we did is we came out and said, I don't have a law enforcement officer that I can point to that I think is racist, nor do I think that they're out there doing police brutality. But I said in a reporter, I said, I live by the badge, I bleed by the badge, I will serve with the badge, and I will do whatever I can. But I also are in a position that I think we need to call it out when we see something that's wrong. And that's not pointing a finger at any individual officer, other than in that instance, and I don't believe that officer that day went to work intending to murder him. But the conversation around that is, well, he did some things that caused that death. And there was other officers there, and there was no supervisor there. And these are the things that, in the heat of the moment, we need to be able to make sure that somebody can also be looking sort of over the shoulder to make sure that nobody does do something that causes harm or death or certainly is going to regret later. So that's the real conversation. And yeah, there's been some people that are not happy, and they've voiced that to me. I respect that. And what I say is, if they were in that situation, given a bunch of situations that we've seen, would they have let that go on, or would they have done something? And every one of them had said, well, I would have done something. And I said, well, we as the chiefs, we're doing something. We're saying, we're not perfect. We're certainly, I hope we're showing that we're supporting our men and women. But one of the ways we need to support them is to give them more training, better training, statewide training. Racial biases that come in. We do implicit bias training, but it's done piecemeal. There's things that this allows us to build off of to work with our stakeholders. And from the beginning, Dan, you and I had a conversation. If you can't admit when something is wrong, you lose all credibility with the people that you're going to then try to sit down with across the table.
I get that. Listen, when we come back, we'll talk about some of the specific things that you think need to go into the training. And of course, there's always the discussion of the protection that the rank and file police officers have. that when it comes to discipline that is being revisited too in this list of 20. Right back with Lincoln's police chief Brian Sullivan at the bottom and the executive director of Police Chiefs Association Sid Wardell. We shall be right back on Dan Yorke's State of Mind. Please stay with us. Back to my State of Mind here on Fox and MyRI TV. Sid Wardell to the top is the former police chief and the executive director of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association. Brian Sullivan is the current police chief in Lincoln. Specifically, as we talk about the 20 promises that you folks have made, I could go down the list, but Chief Sullivan, is there something in training and in bringing things up to code, for lack of a better term, that you are really excited about having happen?
So I think the de-escalation and that we pointed out, the de-escalation, the bias-based police training that we need to continually do. I think those are some important things. One of the things that I'm pretty excited about is the conversations with the community. I've already started it here in Lincoln. We've reached out to a member of Black Lives Matter. I've reached out to a local pastor and a former state trooper, John Avant, to come in and sit down with us and have that tough conversation. Like I said, have that tough conversation with me and a couple of my other administrative staff, and then we're going to bring that to the sergeants, lieutenants, and then the rest of the department to have that tough conversation that we need to have so that we can understand the point of view that I can't have. I don't have that point of view, but at least try to understand it from their point of view.
Yeah, interesting. John has been a guest on the radio and the television show, and he sees things from the inside and talks to me about, and talks to the listeners and viewers about things he saw as a trooper that bothered him. Although he's still bullish on the local police forces. I mean, I don't think he's a slash and bash type of guy. It seems to me that he wants to see constructive change, and I think that's good stuff. As a suburban police department, look, I mean, your demographics in Lincoln are not very diverse. Let's not kid ourselves. Do you find yourself in a position here where you still see some important bias issues that crop up from time to time?
We have Twin River. We have a diverse community up at Twin River that we interact with. Right. We have the community college. We have the mall. So we have a diverse community that we interact with, and it's important for us to have these conversations so that when we do interact.
Thank you for checking me off on that, because just think about Twin River. That is no doubt a melting pot. And so you've got a unique experience in Lincoln. You are very much a suburban police department, but you've got a very metropolitan challenge at Twin River, because people come from hundreds of miles away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how's it been there over the course of the last handful of years?
Twin River has its challenges, but we've not had any issues regarding complaints of race or anything like that. I mean, we've had arrests and incidents there, but nothing that we've received any complaints on bias.
Right. Sid, is there something that you're really excited about in terms of, or know that the composite chiefs are really excited about in terms of the training, specifically? Is there one thing where we go, we're going to be doing this, and this is going to be a change moment?
Well, I think that the change moment is collectively doing it as a state. And, it all comes down to money. And I hate when we end up at that crossroad of whether something does or doesn't get done. But I actually think I sat in a training with Chief Sullivan. I was the executive director. I think he was president at the time with the association. But we sat in an implied bias class from a lady out of Florida, and it was great training, but there was 20 of us there. And it happened because the seats, we were able to get some funding through the municipal academy. But that's something that we need to make sure that there's an hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, I'm not sure what number we're going to use, but that training happens to every officer, because I think we do a great job in Rhode Island teaching our new officers, right? We've got 20 weeks of schooling. When I went to the academy, when Brian and I went to the academy, it was probably around 12 or 13 weeks. It's up to 17, 18, sometimes 20 weeks, depending on how holidays fall. But there's so much we're giving our first line officers, but we're not giving, to a 10-year officer who's set in his ways, maybe getting a little seedy because of, some whether home life or whether the job or whether money, whatever it is, bringing that to his job. We need to be touching those officers. And I really am looking forward to identifying, Massachusetts, Connecticut, right around us, does it every year for 1 week. You go to a training which covers certain blocks, but for that week, you're going to in-service. We don't have that in Rhode Island. So I'm looking forward to us, catching up to the time for that.
When we come back, we're going to talk about this idea of defunding the police, which got a big run early on post George Floyd, which is no doubt simmered. And of course, there's the Officer Bill of Rights issue that demands a lot of attention. But the chiefs from the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, Sid Wardell to our top, he's the executive director, and President Brian Sullivan. We'll be right back on Dan Yorke's State of Mind. Back to my state of mind, the executive director of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association. To your top screen, Sid Wardell, and Lincoln's police chief, Brian Sullivan, from the same organization. Okay, let's talk about the Rhode Island Police Bill of Rights. I mean, the one thing that I've been concerned with in the middle of this COVID thing, and certainly with the George Floyd situation is, God forbid, we had a situation like that. You would not be able to turn on what is obvious. I don't think anybody really wants to be, headhunting police officers here on a disciplinary basis. But it seems to me that you've got a couple of mechanisms here that have been problematic for a long time. It's a long conversation, but only a short amount of time. Chief Sullivan, what do you want to see change, if anything at all, with the Officers' Bill of Rights and the protections that they are offered, and what seems like kind of a star chamber place for discipline to most people on the outside?
Sure. I'd like to probably, the first thing is to look at the number of suspension days that can be given, before that triggers the policeman's bill of rights. Right now, it's 2 days that you can give without triggering a police officer's bill of rights hearing. I think that's an important thing. I think the issue of the panel. The panel is, 3 members, one representing the police department, one representing the officer, and then a neutral. I think that needs to be looked at and modified, in my opinion.
Said that, from a grand scheme, do you feel like all of the chiefs find the same frustration in terms of the Bill of Rights?
So, Dan, this conversation deserves about a 4-hour block, to be honest with you.
Oh, I get it.
Because we all, I think frustration grew out of the fact that a statement was made that if that happened in Rhode Island, the officer couldn't be terminated. I mean, that's not 100% accurate, right? If that happened in Rhode Island, the officer charged with a felony would be suspended right then and there, pending the criminal charges, the outcome. And if they were found guilty, termination by the agency. So you're right, we couldn't fire that officer on the spot, but he would be suspended. He would be, would not be a part of the agency. His gun, his badge would all be taken from him, and they wouldn't be considered a police officer there. I can tell you, we're looking into it right now. There is by far the majority of disciplines that are handed out are infractions of administratively, right? So they're an officer who comes in late. They're an officer who repeatedly has to be told to wear his hat. I don't know. You name it administratively, those are the issues. The issues are not officers that are out there committing criminal offenses and then departments are burdened with keeping them. Have they happened? Yes. But they are few and far between. They get the spotlight, right? There's a police officer who's supposed to be upholding. And unfortunately, sometimes the police officers have done things while on the job, which puts an extra salt in the wound. But there is a process to go through with that. And I'm not here defending the police officers' Bill of Rights. I'm not here saying we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to look at it. There's definitely some areas that, come to light as far as 2020, as opposed to the last time it was looked at in 95. But, by and far, chiefs use discipline, hand out discipline, and probably 99.9% of the time, that discipline is accepted by the officer, and it never even makes it to a Bill of Rights hearing.
Look, listen. Every industry's got its small potatoes problems. I mean, the hat or the late, the blah blah blah. I get it. I just think that you guys have been wise in this time period to be able to take a look at this whole thing. And again, God forbid, we've got something dramatic a la George Floyd. You've got a way to be able to respond and quell what is a very, very tumultuous public response right now. And it's just the way it is. And
I think a big change, Dan, not to cut you off, a big change is remove the secrecy. Get it out in the public so that you can talk about, the proper procedure, what is happening. When the secrecy is there, that just leaves people to suspect that there's something going on.
makes sense. Well, listen, I'll take you up on the 4-hour conversation, maybe an hour. But I get, because there are a lot of nuances, there are a lot of details. Listen, I just want to say congratulations on coming up with this list, the marketing of this concept. I think people in the state, as you go through the work that's going to be required, will see that the work product is very valuable. And let's not forget, at the end of the day, that police officers do a lot of great work. They're such a necessary commodity. And, I want, from the rank and file right up to the management, I want them to feel like they can rightfully know that the public still respects and wants them to succeed. And we'll get through all this tough time together, one way or the other. Guys, thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
And we'll have a final word when we come back. Stay with us. To be able to say, look, we got to reintroduce some concepts in our industry, but I hope this helps to bring back the glue that should exist between the people of this community and police departments, not only here but across the region and the country. You have a great night. Take care.